All right, looks like the recording is on. Good morning, my name is Cameron Perez Verdia. I'd like to call to order this Assembly Committee meeting of the whole of Public Safety, the Public Safety Committee. It is Wednesday, October 6th, 2021 at 11:10 a.m. Let's start by calling roll, please.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Here.
Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Dolatel?
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Rivera? Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Allard? Ms. LaFreya? You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Just as a reminder, if you want to get into the queue, please use the chat or you can text me. We have a pretty significant agenda today, so we will do our best to get through all of it. It sounds like Ms. Kennedy wants to get into the queue right away. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. First of all, I know Ms. Allard has some other appointments, so I don't believe she will be joining us today. But secondly, and probably more importantly, is public access to this meeting. This was a bit of a last minute change to switch from live to Teams. So I was just curious if we could maybe have our staff member, Ms. Belzer, explain to us how actually get the link to the Teams. If that's available to the public or if the public simply has to use the phone-in access number. Thank you.
So we are actually giving the public the dial-in information, and then we'll post the recording after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, they really don't have access to the visual portion of this meeting, like on their laptop or something. They actually only have the ability to use the phone number.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I will tell you that the email that we just received from the media, I had already sent the agenda to them. So they should have the call-in numbers, but it's good for us to check on that too. So, all right, let's jump in and get started. We are going to begin with a report from the Anchorage Police Department. Would a representative from APD like to begin?
Hi, Karen. Good morning. This is Amy Domboski, the municipal manager. Chief McCoy has given me a very extensive list of talking points and a report for the committee, so I will go through that for him.
Great.
I think the first thing on your agenda is relating to APD overtime, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Let me know if you can see that. Can you see the APD graphic?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So relating to APD overtime, APD spends on average of $5 to $6 million in overtime annually. Over the last several years, the department has been under budgeted for overtime. And this slide that Chief McCoy gave me represents not only what has been budgeted in the gray, but what has actually been spent over the last few years in the blue. APD's 2021 overtime budget was $2.1 million. That's what was budgeted. As of September 19th, 2021, APD has expended approximately $3.6 million in overtime. The year-end overtime projection for APD is $5 million. There are some examples of overtime expenditure estimates, and some of those examples are non-discretionary major crime investigations, such as homicide, sexual assault, child sexual abuse, serious injury assaults, robberies, SWAT situations, fatality, traffic collisions, All of this accounts to about $1 million in overtime annually. Additionally, staffing for patrol and dispatch, these numbers are dramatically impacted by FMLA, sick call, and most recently, the COVID quarantine. Overtime is necessary to ensure that there is adequate first responders, emergency services available. With increased responsibilities, such as the expansion of APD's jurisdiction into the Turnagain Arm and downtown foot patrols, a fully staffed dispatch center is critical to maintain 911 wait times and ensure public safety. This all accounts to about $2.6 million in overtime annually. APD Command is actively managing overtime expenditures. However, the department must be realistic. If not, the only way to control current overtime expenditures is to dramatically cut police services. One example of APD overtime active management to address overtime is eliminating follow-up or end-of-shift report writing on overtime. However, Chief McCoy said this alone will not come close to having the impact of attaining the $5 to $6 million in overtime that is going to be spent annually. So with that, that is the overtime update for APD. Chair, did you want me to just launch right into the body-worn cameras?
Yes, I have questions in the queue at this point, so please proceed.
Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share, so give me one technology second here. Okay, so with respect to body-worn cameras, Chief McCoy is reporting that APD has worked closely with the community since February to draft a body-worn camera policy. The goal was to have an open and transparent process that allows input from the public to ensure that APD has a policy that instills trust and accountability while meeting the operational needs and protecting our officers. APD has hosted and participated in public listening sessions in June and August. The goals of those listening sessions were to allow the public an opportunity to share their thoughts, concerns, and expectations with the department. In addition to the listening sessions, the department received great feedback through one-on-one conversations with Anchorage citizens, various community groups, and nonprofit organizations. Through that process, the department identified the following major areas of public interest. First is the release of video. Second is when will officers activate and deactivate cameras? And third, will officers be allowed to review the videos? The Municipality of Anchorage Legal Department has expressed concerns relating to privacy laws and the additional protections related to privacy in Alaska. After further review and discussion with MOA Legal on the draft policy, it has been updated to include officers in uniform performing patrol or crime suppression duties shall always wear body-worn cameras while on duty. Officers shall record all calls for service when initiating an encounter with the public unless otherwise accepted under the policy, or it is unsafe to do so, impossible to do so, or impractical to do so. Officers may not review or copy recordings in the following circumstances: when there is an in custody death, when there is an use of deadly force, where there is a use of force or police action resulting in an injury to the public requiring admittance to the hospital beyond medical clearance, when an employee is subject to a criminal investigation, or after being notified of an administrative investigation. Body-worn camera footage may be released in accordance with Anchorage Municipal Code 3.90, access to public records. All requests shall be made to and processed through APD record. Later today, a copy of the draft policy will be posted on the APD webpage that can be found at anchoragepolice.com for review and feedback until November. APD has applied for a federal grant to assist with the acquisition of the body-worn camera technology and equipment. Once the grant status is known, the department will proceed with the purchasing process. And that is APD's update.
Super. I actually have a question in the queue for the previous topic that we missed. So, Mr. Weddleton, you have a question?
Yeah, Amy, you I think you just briefly mentioned Turnagain Arm when you were talking about overtime, and I'm curious, that's supposed to be on a fully reimbursed basis anytime they do anything there. And so are we if we're incurring overtime, I would expect that that would be part of the billing. Just, I don't know, can you flesh that out and tell me how you're handling that?
Yeah, I will. I'll have to double check with Chief McCoy, but I do believe they are seeking reimbursement. But I'll have to make sure that that reimbursement fully covers those costs. But I will get back with you, Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, that's the intent that it would. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. I don't see anybody else in the queue. I do have just a clarifying question related to the body camera. So work. Previously, there was, and I think you may have addressed this. There was a holdup from legal, and so is in your report you're saying that that's been resolved and that a new version of the policy that has been vetted through legal is now available. That's my first question. And then second is, in terms of the public process, is there an intent to go back out to the public and have additional conversations with the public to get more feedback on the current plan?
Thank you for those questions, Chairman. I think on both counts, the answer is yes. So MOA Legal has identified those subcategories of times when, we don't, that they'll have more control, I guess, over the video. Like if there's an officer that's being investigated, if there's a death, if there's certain criteria that they believe that there's privacy issues or potential legal issues, those are the categories that they have identified here. So I'm just going to recap them really quickly. And I think that legal is confident, with the current structure that they're going to be fine. When there's an in-custody death, when there is use of deadly force, and where there is use of force or police action resulting in an injury to the public requiring admittance to the hospital beyond medical clearance, when an employee is subject to a criminal investigation, or after being notified of an administrative investigation. So I think those are the categories that legal was wanting to have more definition around, and I think that this has achieved that. With respect to what was your second question? I'm sorry, I forgot already.
The public process. There was a public meeting that APD put on. There was also some effort from the Public Safety Commission to get out to the public. So just curious from your perspective, what's the next step in terms of public engagement?
Sure. So the next step is later today, the policy will be published online, and then APD will be taking public comment through November on those on the policy and getting feedback from the public on recommendations for changes. If they like it, we would like to hear those comments as well. But that's the process. So we'll leave the public comment process open through November. And I think that will probably determine the level of response we get will determine our next step, whether it's adjusting the policy or coming back to this committee.
Great. That's wonderful. Thanks. And then I do have a question from Member Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Domboski, for the report, especially that the policy is going to be up on the website online. I know there's been a lot of people that have been interested in seeing how it's evolving. But I want to ask some real specifics about how somebody accesses that. We still get, complaints about how difficult it is to find something on the Muni website. So can you specifically tell people where they go to find that particular document? And then secondly, if they do want to comment, where do those comments need to go? Do these need to go to somebody's email? Is there a place online after that policy to actually comment? Can you maybe tell me a little bit more about really what's available and where it is on the webpage? Thanks.
And I am just really quick trying to go to it. So my expectation is, I'm just looking to see if it's up already. It is not quite up, but if you go to anchoragepolice.com, there will be a link on the main page to be able to find that policy. And within the narrative there, they should have a specific link that's very obvious that shows where you can submit public comments. It's not up yet, so I can't tell you specifically how to comment, but it'll be very obvious when people go to it. So my recommendation is just go to anchoragepolice.com, and there will be something on the homepage that directs people exactly to the policy and how to comment.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Super. Okay, Ms. Dombrowski, anything else from APD that you'd like to report?
Nope, that's it. We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to move on to the Anchorage Fire Department regular updates, and it looks like they have a couple of items as well they want to address. So is there a representative from AFD that would like to make that presentation?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Chairman, Chief Schrage here. I'm of course joined by our municipal manager, Amy Dombrowski, and by my assistant chief, Alex Boyd, who's here to answer questions. As we had agreed, I was going to give you an abbreviated version of our presentation on the our overtime reduction plans, our active management. And so without any further ado, and with your concurrence, I will share my screen.
Thank you.
And I believe, are you seeing my working screen or the?
Nothing yet. My pop. Oh, there we go. Yep, your presentation's up.
Okay. And this is the screen that just shows the one slide, overtime reduction?
Yeah, no, it's actually showing two slides, showing the
Okay. Well,
version.
I'm sharing the wrong screen. Well, this will work for the time being. What you'll see here is my notes. Okay, well, with that in mind, okay, so here's our overtime reduction plan. It's, as you are aware, it has generated a certain amount of public interest. And so it's helpful for us to be able to show you the rationale that went into our decision to control overtime in the manner in which we are. Here's a brief statement of the problem. This has been shared with you previously. This is August data, a breakdown of the sources of our overtime. As you can see, the largest amount is our scheduled annual leave, which is about 41%. This is time that we provide to our employees for time away from work, for recreation, and to rejuvenate and rest from work. And it's also governed by our labor agreement with the IAFF. Also of note here, about 5.5% of our time off in August was for COVID-related sickness and quarantine. And 9% for family leave, 2% for funeral leave, and a few other things. But the point I wanted you to see is that the biggest portion of time off is annual leave, which we provide. Throughout 2021 so far, we've exceeded our overtime budget, which is about 3.37 million. Year to date, we've spent about 3.4. This is not too much different from any of the previous 4 years. So this is an ongoing challenge. What is different is our manner in attempting to manage it this year. This started on October 1st. What we're doing is we're essentially staffing our unit of the units which are staffed with overtime. We're only staffing it for the first 12 hours of the shift. So there are some units which will go offline at 9 p.m. and we'll send overtimers home at that time. We, as you know, are going to continue to provide coverage in every station and every area of town so that we can continue to have an immediate response to fire and medical emergencies at all times. This depicts our level of coverage across the city. The panel on the left shows the types of units that we have. So for example, up here at the top, you can see we have 19 personnel assigned at the downtown fire station, Station 1. 3 ambulances, 2 engines, a truck, a battalion, and a few other pieces of equipment. And then let's go to down here, Station 9 on D. Armand Road. You can see we have an engine, a tender, and an ambulance staffed here, and 6 personnel. The panel on the right depicts our current ability to reach all areas of time within 4 minutes or 8 minutes. The green represents our target to achieve a 4-minute drive time to all areas of town. We don't currently meet that in all areas. The yellow areas are areas where we're falling short. We're still meeting our secondary goal of 8 minutes for drive time. So, and then of course there are a few areas, Stuckagen Heights, for example, Potter Heights, where we don't meet any of our standards at all in terms of those 4 or 8 minute response time goals. This is the same panel on the left. On the right now, we can see the 10-year distribution. This is a heat map of structural fire calls that we've responded to. And this is very similar to if we were to do a heat map for cardiac arrest calls or any other type of emergency, it would be similar. But this as a surrogate for other types of calls, you can see that most of our calls basically occur in the place. Let me say it differently. We're basically staffing to meet the need. So if we go back a slide to this panel on the left, you can see that we're staffing more people and more equipment in the stations where the most number of calls are occurring. And so in that way, we are we're being responsive to our actual call volume. We looked at 3 years worth of data, and what we've concluded is that it's reasonable for us to shut down some units on occasion at night after 9 p.m. This graph shows every in-service company that we have throughout the year, and each block across the x-axis represents a 1-hour block of time from 9 a.m. on the left to 9 a.m. the following morning on the right. And each data point is the average number of calls that each unit went on during that particular hour of the day, every day, on average over the entire course of 2020. And so you can see that the pattern is pretty consistent, that basically we're busier during the day and our call volume drops off precipitously at around 9 p.m. The vertical demarcation line here shows the 9 p.m. time frame. And what we have concluded from this is that we can reasonably send some overtimers home after 9 p.m. What impact does that have on our ability to respond? And that's the questions that I'll answer next. This bar graph shows you the gray band across the bottom is our average number of incidents for every hour of the day throughout 2020. And so you can see that we go on more incidents during the day and fewer at night. So for example, at 4 p.m., we went on during 2020 an average of 5.8 calls for that hour between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. At 4 a.m., for example, you can see we went on 2.1 calls per average across the department during that hour of the day, every day through 2020. The red bars represent the total number of personnel committed to those incidents. So again, at 4 p.m., which is right here, we had 30 of our employees, on-duty employees, working those 5.8 incidents on average. And again, at 4 a.m., we had 11 personnel handling 2.1 incidents. The green bar is the difference between the number of people that were on a call during that hour and our minimum staffing, which is 98 personnel. So at 4 p.m., you can see we had 4 a.m., we had 11 people responding to calls, we had another 87 people standing by, writing reports, in quarters, and things like that. And so it follows that we're less busy at night and our availability of surplus personnel increases. So that was the average. This is the worst case scenario, looking back 10 years. The most number of people that we had during any given hour, these are no longer averages, the most number of people that we had assigned, for example, at the 4 a.m. hour was 40 personnel over the course of 10 years during that 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. hour. So even in the worst case scenario, we still at 4 a.m. had 58 people unassigned to other calls. This next slide is the same data. It just breaks out the variance between the minimum, or correction, the variance between the average number of personnel and the maximum number of personnel experienced over 10 years. There is no case in the last 10 years when we didn't have enough personnel to handle all of the incidents that occurred. So that basically is it. We are going to look at vacancies after 9 p.m. We're going to choose selected units to close down in order to meet our overtime reduction targets. We're going to choose them based on distribution of our other assets. For example, we want to leave every station staffed. We want to have a company in every fire station ready to respond. We want to take into consideration the distribution of our workload. So we'll have the busier stations, we'll continue to have more people in them. And you know, some days we'll maybe attempt to reduce 24 hours of overtime by closing down or sending 2 overtimers home. Other days we may just send 1 home because it wouldn't be worth closing down an entire company just to save 12 hours. This plan will not reduce our ability to continue to meet our objectives of getting 4 firefighters on the scene in 4 minutes and 15 in 8 minutes, nor will it interfere with our ability to get a BLS response on scene to all areas of town in 4 minutes and an ALS response within 8. These are just a few challenges that we will have to overcome. Obviously, we'll be distributing the workload to other people. Should we get that once in a decade or once in a century event where we need more people than are available, we're working on an ability to do an emergency callback of all personnel simultaneously and leveraging our mutual aid partners. So that's it. We think this is a responsible approach, and I will turn it over to Amy for any questions.
Great. I actually have a couple in the queue. So let's begin with Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was, I believe, and it's a little bit hard to tell with the Teams system, but I believe that we have Justin Mack and Brian Murphy from IAFF here, and I was wondering if we could hear their thoughts on this proposal as well.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead. You just please identify yourself and go ahead and share your thoughts.
Absolutely. My name is Justin Mack. Last name's M-A-C-K. I'm a representative for the Firefighters Local 1264. As mentioned by the fire chief, the budget and the overtime budget with the Anchorage firefighters has been a chronic problem that we've faced, and the subsequent rig closures that we've seen because of it have also been a chronic issue. So we strongly believe there's a path forward. That path includes firefighters and administration working together to benefit the community. We believe that we must objectively look at and understand the problem we're trying to solve. We do have a wide array of reasons why our members are off the job, and the fire chief mentioned a few of them. But our leave is not typically unique to firefighters. Most employees have sick calls and vacation, new babies, sick family members that require care, death of loved ones. Our members serve in the armed forces, we serve on juries, and we're taken off the job to teach in various academies and to attend training. None of this is out of the ordinary. I think there's a misconception about the leave we take and the sick calls that we have. On average, a firefighter calls in 2.5 days in a year. A firefighter takes approximately 5.5 days of leave in a year. We work 2,900 hours in a year. The sick calls and the leave are far from extraordinary, but we do have challenges that are unique to the work we do. We work a physically demanding job. We're injuring firefighters at an alarming rate. It's taking injured workers longer to come back to work. These are problems we can address. We can reduce injuries. We can get workers back on the job sooner, but it takes a desire to do so. It takes an investment, a commitment from both sides. We want to solve the problem, but there is risk in closing fire units as a solution to a problem that's plagued us for so long.
Thank you. And I do have a number of people in the queue, so if we can, I'd like to start to go through those. I have Ms. Kennedy next, then Ms. Quinn Davidson, and then Mr. Constant. So Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I can be brief on mine. I was just curious about the call response numbers that you mentioned, Chief Schrage, for about 10 years ago. And I was just wondering if that was during the spice epidemic, if you know kind of what was going on then. And so obviously it's some historical information. But anyway, just wondered if that was related to spice and how that actually compares in terms of our staffing then versus our staffing now, and if that's part of the difference that we haven't seen so much of an overage in response times and that because of COVID. So that's one question. Then I have another quick one.
Okay, well, yeah, those are great questions. Thank you through the chair. I honestly don't know. Maybe I can, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, if I can ask Chief Boyd to see if he has an opinion about it.
Yes, hello. Through the chair as well. I'll say that during the spice epidemic, most of our incidents that occurred happened during our normal 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. High peak hours. And since that, we've also increased our ambulance fleet by 4 ambulances and seen a difference in our response volumes locally. And those numbers for transports and emergency incidents were higher than average, but they were contained within that maximum count number each day.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that one. And then my other question is in regard to response time. You know, I know the Anchorage Bowl area has that 4-minute response time, which I think is great. And I just wondered if that same number applies to Eagle River, the Eagle River Fire Station and certainly a 4-minute, is there a 4-minute response time within the Eagle River Fire District area? Is that the same or is it different? Thanks.
Thank you for the question through the chair. Yes, we apply the same standard to all the areas that we're responsible for. That is within the Anchorage Fire Service area. And so our objective is a 4-minute initial response to all fires with a minimum of 4 personnel. And for medical emergencies, at least a BLS response within 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying the 4-minute is just a goal. It's not necessarily reality? Thanks.
I think it is a goal, and we are effectively achieving that in most areas across the fire service area. that was the green and yellow heat map. The green showed all the areas where we were meeting that 4-minute objective, and the yellow areas were the places where we were falling a little bit short.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Chief Shoggy for being here and the others who have spoken as well. I was curious, Chief, sort of along the lines of what Ms. Kennedy was asking, back to your slides 6 and 7. I noticed that, if I'm remembering correctly, the Hillside had a low rate of calls or issues, but was one of the higher response times. And it actually, so first you could correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You're not incorrect. Let me just pull this up. If I can just share this again, and that'll equip me to better answer your question.
Thanks.
No. I'm sharing now. Okay, so here's the heat map. The little emblems throughout this map show where the location of our fire stations. This one up here in the lower corner is Fire Station 10 on Rabbit Creek Road. You can see that it's probably 50-50. We are meeting the 4-minute drive times in all the green areas, and we're exceeding it in the yellow areas. The red places are where we exceed 15 minutes of response time. So it's correct for you to say that our call volume is lower. There are areas with higher response times, but generally we have quite good response times in all areas.
Great. Okay, that's really helpful. And Mr. Chair, can I just do a quick follow-up?
Yes, please.
And now that I'm seeing this again, maybe this isn't relevant because it's looking like most of the bowl has a pretty good response time. But I'm curious if you've ever done this sort of map based on demographics. And I think we see a history of poorer parts of town getting poorer services. I'm not suggesting that's necessarily happening here, but I'm curious, would you be willing to do something like that so we could see if there are any changes we as an assembly or the administration needs to make to be sure that we're seeing equitable services across the bowl?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, if I understand your question, you're asking if we'd be open to looking at those data, and yes, absolutely. The answer is yes. I'm relatively new here, but I'm fairly confident that that's a study we would have performed at some time. I'll see what I can find out, and I'll share that information through Amy.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Next up, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I kind of have questions in 2 rounds. First, are the professional firefighters still on the phone? Mr. Mack, are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing them here still. My question for them is, what is their kind of proposed theory on possibilities for long-term solutions to the overtime matters that we hear are such a priority? So I want to hear that from them, but I can get that offline. Chief, for you, I have kind of a short stack of questions. What are the risks that we're calculating that may in fact occur if something doesn't go right with our rolling kind of apparatus strategy? And then are the August overtime numbers that we just received accurate kind of with the rest of the year? Is it kind of in flow? Is it high or low, or is it just kind of average? Is it a good reflection? And then what is our strategy kind of in management if these overtime issues continue? Are we going to see further reduced hours?
Okay, thank you for those questions. Assemblymember Constant, and again through the chair. Okay, so to your first question about quantifying the risk, we have run some numbers. I've been pretty clear that this plan is not without risk. We think it's manageable risk. There's a roughly a 1 in 5 chance or 20% chance that an initial response will be delayed. So for example, let's just take Station 6, for example, in Muldoon. It's currently staffed with an engine and an ambulance. If we were to take one of those units out of service because of overtime, we would leave the other one staffed so that they could make an immediate 4-minute response to everywhere within their area. There's a 1 in 5 chance, based on our analysis, that unit will also be on another call, which would then result in a delay to other calls within that area. So I would ask Alex, Chief Boyd, if you have anything to add to that. I think he's done a deeper dive into the probabilities.
And Chief Boyd, if I might, the numbers are one thing, but the actual categories of risk is what I'm really hoping we hear. What are the risks?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking when you say what are the risks.
Well, so if I might, the chief said the first one was that we might have slower initial response times. What are other risks along those lines that we should be watching for from a policy perspective to know if this is undue or out of, a bad gamble, if you will?
I'll take that one, Alex. Absolutely. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so there is a risk that one of the units or all of the units that remain staffed in a station will be committed to another call and unavailable to respond. This is something that happens every day of the year as it is now. So for example, using the Station 6 in Muldoon example, if we were to have a structure fire there, it would empty out Station 6 in Muldoon, Station 14 at Baxter Road, Station 3 at Airport Heights, and it would also draw companies from downtown and other places. And so this happens every day when we get a multi-company response. There are times when we're relatively uncovered for short periods of time. By taking these units out of service, basically it increases the likelihood that could occur. But again, we're estimating that to be about 1 in 5. The consequences of that could be, you can imagine increased fire damage, increased fire loss, and it could reduce our cardiac arrest survival rate, for example, and things like that. To your second question, were the August numbers indicative of other months throughout the year? I'm going to say I think so, but I don't really know. Once again, I'm going to call on Chief Boyd to answer the question for me. If he knows, he may not know.
I can state that they are pretty consistent across the board. We do, however, see spikes in annual leave during our nicer parts of the year. We do live in Alaska. It's a gorgeous place. So our summers tend to have high leave usage. And times like right now, we have a lower scheduled leave usage and an increase in sick and other types of usage on average.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Constant, did that answer your questions?
There was the third question of, and I know this is fairly speculative because tomorrow is another day, but the question is, okay, we do this and we find that we still have issues of overtime. Is then the intent to just dig deeper into the staffing to attempt to manage this, or are there other strategies? What's the long-term plan here?
Thank you, Assemblymember Constant, through the chair. Yeah, I think that's a policy decision that I would seek guidance for. We're setting fairly modest targets right now on our overtime reduction goals. We could clearly close more. We have every day a handful or more people on overtime. We could clearly send them all home at 9 p.m. At this point, I think that's an unreasonable risk for me to advocate for. But the point is, there's a continuum from not sending anybody home at 9 p.m. to sending all of the overtimers home, and there's a corresponding level of risk. The more people we send home, the greater the likelihood that these undesirable effects will be experienced.
All right. So, and Mr. Presverdia, I understand that the firefighters are on. Mr. Mack, are you there?
Yeah, I'm online. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks. It's really the same question. What do you believe are the strategies for long-term fixing this issue so that we don't find ourselves taking unnecessary risk or risks that we lose on in the come?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the problem objectively. We have to look at all the reasons why overtime is generated. And what we have in front of us, as mentioned by the chief earlier, is we're pretty consistent in where we end up with overtime. Now, what we understand based on the budget and the cuts and the reductions with the units being closed is that overtime has been deemed sort of unreasonable. So we have a target that we'd like to hit with our overtime, and we have the actual numbers that we're getting. So how do we close that gap a little bit? Obviously, increasing funding and budgeting long-term and just saying this is how it is a solution, but that's not a long-term fix to what we decided is an overtime problem. So the answer probably lies in how do we reduce the number of folks we have off at any given time. And there's some of that leave that we can't adjust. As mentioned before, the folks that we have off on injury and long-term injury leave, it is seemingly very high. Our injury rates seem to be high, and the problem is a relatively minor injury, which in a normal 40-hour world would probably allow the person to go back and function completely fine at their job. We're not afforded that luxury. We have to be at 100%, so the coming back to work portion takes longer. But there are solutions. Other departments and other corporate entities have instituted policies that look at injuries, look at reducing injuries, and look at getting folks back to work sooner. So there are places we can dig in and really find long-term solutions that not only benefit the employees, but benefit the community from a budget standpoint, make sure that we have the coverage that we've all deemed necessary and the coverage that the community expects from us. And we also have to recognize that there's some leave that we just simply, we can't change. If a firefighter has a baby, has a sick, therefore, these are things that are, federally protected. We have folks out on military leave and jury duty. There's some leave that we're just probably not going to be able to impact. So for those types of leaves, we just have to account for that, whether it's in staffing or whether it's in the budget. But I think the answer lies with just objectively identifying the problem, sitting down and figuring out how to close that gap and not have rig closures be a fourth quarter solution every single year to a problem that we know is coming.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Great. Next in the queue, I have Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just wondering, since Stuckagon Heights is an area that's already in the red zone, approximately a 15 minutes, are you planning to reduce staff at station number 14, that is the closest station to Stuckagon? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you through the chair. Station 14 at Baxter and Tudor is not off the table. It's conceivable that we would close a unit at that station. The reason we're not closing any companies out at Eagle River is because they're geographically incontiguous. So Station 14 on Stuckagen Heights Road there has other stations that can easily move into the area to backfill. So it's adjacent to Station 4 and Station 6 and Muldoon are adjoining areas, and so is Airport Heights.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And I don't see any other questions at this point in the queue. So Chief, thank you so much for being here and for your presentation. We really appreciate it. If there's nothing else for the Fire Chief, we are going to move on to our next item on the agenda, and that is a report from the Law Department. Would someone from the Law Department like to do that presentation? Anybody on?
You know, Mr. Presbury, I do have a quick question on this map. Maybe I missed it, the one that's showing. What are the numbers adjacent to the badges there? Because they aren't concurrent with the station number. I see Ms. Domboski has her hand up. Maybe she knows.
Hand up. Do you want to address that question?
I think Chief Struggy is probably still on, but my recollection is that's the number of rigs that are in those stations.
Okay, thank you.
The number of personnel, I think, that are in those stations.
Okay.
Chief Struggy, are you still on?
So just for future purposes, it might be helpful to label.
Oh, he's here. Okay, he can answer. What are the numbers that correlate to those badges?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The number that is on the map that is right next to each one of the badges, what does that number represent?
Those, okay, are you still looking at it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't unshared my screen, sorry. Yeah, those are the number of people assigned to that station on a typical day.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll unshare my screen now, sorry about that.
No, thank you for the clarification. Your sharing inspired a new question, so that's great. All right, so I don't hear. I'm going to do one more call for someone from the Department of Law. Ms. Domboski, are you going to speak on? Okay, great.
I can. I thought Sarah might be on, but she did share with me her update, and I'll just give it to you. It's 2 brief points. Number 1, jury trials are suspended through at least October 29th, 2021. Their office continues to try to resolve cases in a timely manner despite the suspension of jury trials. Her second point is that she said, we do not have a cost estimate for the body cams at this time. As she's told the committee before, there are currently just too many unknowns, which software will be chosen by APD, policy of when used, quality of video, etc. It is possible that processing of body cam videos could require up to 2.5 full-time staff. Again, this is a rough estimate. So that's the information I have from the Department of Law. And while I have the floor, Mr. Chair, I hope you'll indulge me. I just wanted to point out that today around noon, so it may have already gone out, APD was going to be putting out a Nixle alert that has instructions on how to access the body-worn camera policy and how to comment and provide feedback.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see anybody in the queue, but I do have a question. Do you may not have this answer. I can get it offline. But do you know what is the criteria that is used to suspend jury trials? Is there a specific sort of set of circumstances or information that's used to make that determination?
That is out of my expertise. I can get you that information. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I had a question from a constituent that asked that specific question. So would love to get an answer to that. Wonderful. Okay. I don't see any additional questions in the queue for
Mr. President.
Yes. Oh,
The
hand up.
presiding judges, yeah. I should take it down. The presiding judges of each district to make those decisions. So you can verify that, Ms. Zaboski, but it's a decision of the presiding judges in the court itself.
Okay. I think what I was looking for is based on what. So that's what the question was, is that if there is current information or that is used to determine once the situation is at this point, we do it. Once that at this point, we do not. So that was the question, is what kinds of sort of factors are a part of that decision. So, okay. So we're gonna move on. I actually don't know at this point if Amanda Moser is on the phone. Amanda, are you with us today and able to do a report on the downtown partnership? I think there was a question as to whether she was able to come on today or not. Ms. Kennedy, have you been able to determine whether she's on the call or not?
No, Mr. Chair, I have not. So I have asked, but haven't gotten a comment back. So if she's not answering you, then I would suspect that she is not available, and we will just invite her back next month. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Constant here again.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
So she actually asked me to make a report for her tonight at the Downtown Community Council for lack of being able to participate. And I think essentially I can very briefly make the same report here. The resolution that they passed and sent to us about issues relating to police calls for service and the ongoing challenges of the downtown, they have made a decision that they are transitioning out of their safety first call line in partnership with the Community Development Authority and returning their operation to a patrol-based instead of call and response-based, which will hopefully increase the downtown merchants' participation in calling 311 when they need, instead of calling on them to get in the way of the records being accurate and clear. So essentially, they have a timeline. I think it might be the end of the year. I don't have the very specifics at which that service will be done, but they are moving from the call service to patrol service model.
Thank you. Thank you. That was my understanding as well. Wonderful. I don't see any questions or anybody in the queue at this point or any hands raised. So we're going to move forward and to see if there is any member of the public who would like to speak. If you would, please make yourself known. Mr. Haberman, wonderful. So if you could please identify yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Go ahead.
I set my timer. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I represent myself, follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. The meeting just prior, I made a concern at the health committee that you're having meetings where the public cannot connect visually, and you've got documents there that the public can't see, and it's not on the website, by the way, on this one. The opportunity for the public to follow is like wait till later, and then you can see it later. It is not an appropriate way to conduct meetings and have a participation with the public. Now, I'll go to the camera issue here. It was announced by the administration for the police department, Amy Zaboski, that they're going to be putting out it'll be posted, the results of the delay in further discussion on the recommendations on the body camera. They wanted to hear from legal, and that took several months. And in the several months, now the announcement is it's going to be posted. It's not been posted. It's going to be posted today. And there's no clear indication that there's indication that they're going to receive public comment. But public comment at a meeting, that's not being said. And I remind you also that so far the public comment opportunity for attending meetings on the issue that has first been run by the police department was rather not handled great. The first one I attended, and then it later on went to the Public Safety Commission, and that one you had to be physically there, and there was no tape for the public to listen to those comments. Another problem, the microphones were not working for some time. I pleaded that meeting where you need to get the mics to work and get this meeting taped. And unfortunately, that has been the sad story of this scenario. And I remind you also that the result of the issue of body cameras has really come about over a year ago when the nationally public were calling for cleaning up the situation and dealing with an accountability of the police department, and body cameras was essential. But the process that's being handled and mishandled by this administration and the assembly and whoever is handling these meetings on this issue to bring in public comment has not been appropriate, and it's deeply concerning. And with respect, I remind you also the Port Commission is meeting right now, and it's a conflict, and you should really not be doing that scenario. With 18 seconds to spare, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to speak at this time? If you would, please identify yourself. Okay. Well, we're going to give everybody. Oh, yes. Is there someone who'd like to speak?
This is Andy Erickson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you would like to speak, you can begin now, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I just had some trouble unmuting myself because it wasn't, this conference line was very difficult to access. I'd like to echo Mr. Haberman's concerns about this. The notice for this meeting said that it was going to be held at the conference room in number 155, but there actually wasn't anyone there, and no one in that building could direct me to where this meeting was actually taking place. I wanted to note there was also a media at that conference room waiting to access this meeting, and then the telephone number didn't work until about 20 minutes into this meeting, so that was a huge problem. I'd just like to kind of encourage you to do a little bit better with the public notice and to make these meetings more accessible. I'm also frustrated that I can't see the visuals that you're using. Mr. Haberman is actually absolutely correct that it's frustrating to be at a public meeting where apparently the members of the committee get to see visuals and the members of the public do not. That's just really frustrating. On the topic of body-worn cameras, I'm reviewing the current policies now that are posted online, and I'm disappointed to see that there's no provision for an automatic release of certain videos. On August 18th at the Public Safety Advisory Commission meeting, Chief McCoy said that his preference was to have an automatic release provision and that was submitted to the Department of Law for review. So we're left to assume that the Department of Law did not allow that automatic release provision to go forward. And I think that raises a lot of questions about why. The Department of Justice has specifically recommended to the Anchorage Police Department that it include an automatic release provision in its policies. And the fact that that's not there, I think raises a lot of red flags and I think questions about how that has come about, especially because apparently Chief McCoy's preferences have been overruled by someone in the municipality. And I think that we need to get some answers about what happened there. So I just encourage you to sort of find out what's going on with why are Chief McCoy's preferences for best management or best practices being approved, and especially because the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. has recommended that for police departments as the best practice for body-worn cameras. The fact that we're not seeing that here in Anchorage is a little bit alarming, and I'd like to get to the bottom of how that was not included in this latest draft. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And I've made note of both of your comments, and we'll work on following up on both of those. Thank you for your time. Would anybody else in the public like to use this time to speak? If so, I'm going to just pause for a minute to give you a moment to get off mute and come forward. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to adjourn this meeting a little bit early. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for the presenters. Enjoy the rest of your day. This meeting is now adjourned.